Paper Video takes on the challenge of delivering quality tuition to all learners in South Africa through innovation and technology. They do so by embedding videos featuring quality teachers into resources that are widely used by learners to prepare for tests and exams. In their talk today, Augment, Not Reinvent, they will discuss how technology should be applied in education to make an effective difference and how paper video fits into this model. This session today is on how to augment teaching with technology, and the resources span 4 subjects, which also includes mathematics. Attendees will be given, you will be given guidelines on how to not just jump into technology too soon, how to use the proper infrastructure you need, and what the best programs for internet-based learnings are, and which tools to use for optimum technology in your schools. So we all realize what an important part technology is playing in every facet of our lives, and I'm sure many of you are starting to bring technology into your teaching, and so that is what Paul is going to be here today to talk to us about.
My name is Paul Maree, and I am a mathematics teacher and the co-founder of Paper Video, which is a new social enterprise that aims to make quality tuition available to all learners in South Africa. Today I will be talking about technology in education, and I will also then spend some time speaking about the resource that we have developed at Paper Video. In June last year, we started putting together resources to help matrics prepare for their final mathematics exams, and we enhanced past exam papers by providing video solutions for each question in the exam. We launched our resource with 2 months to go before the final exams, and were pleasantly surprised by the reception. And following that, we decided to use this year to go full time into it, to expand our offerings to more subjects and to more grades. I wonder if you would agree that the implementation of technology at the moment is being roughly translated as, let's make sure that every student has a tablet and every single classroom has a smartboard. It seems to be that we just want to throw devices into everyone's hands. Very often they do speak about the fact that training is integral, as it is, but I would go so far as to argue that I'm not sure that we have fully considered all of the very important issues and aspects that we should take into account when deciding whether technology should be introduced into a classroom or into teaching. We at Paper Video believe that the key effective implementation of technology in education can be described in 3 words, whether or not we should implement technology. And those 3 words are, does this technology augment or does it reinvent? Augment, not reinvent. When deciding whether or not to implement a certain technological innovation, we think it is crucial that you ask, does this augment education or does this try to reinvent education? By augment, I mean using technology in a way that adds value to the teaching process, in a way that keeps the teacher at the central focus of that process. And I think that augmenting education can take 2 forms. One, it can enrich our teaching by enhancing the explanation of ideas, events, and concepts. In other words, our main duty as teachers. And number 2, it can streamline and simplify administration and classroom management For example, attendance registers, homework submissions, marking, assessments, handing out materials in class, etc., which will free up more time for teaching. To decide what will augment education in comparison to reinventing it, I think the first thing we must do is ask ourselves, what elements need to be in place for the successful implementation of technology? Let us get the obvious things out of the way. First, one needs teachers that are willing and able to use technology, or alternatively, willing and able to be trained how to use technology. Training takes time, but more challenging is the effort that it takes to integrate that new technology into your current teaching practices. Given how much teachers already have to do, if a new technology is going to require us to reinvent our teaching, the added time and effort that that takes, it's not necessarily going to seem worth it to us as teachers. This is often why new innovations fail to be implemented and to make any kind of impact. They are asking us to veer too far off course from what we know works. Second, competent support staff whose job it is to ensure the smooth functioning of technology are essential. Where there is technology, there will be technological issues, from the obvious to the completely undiagnosable. Perhaps some point in my talk will be a good example of this. With these, and finally, the infrastructure that is necessary for a good use of technology is another obvious element that needs to be in place. In this category, I include hardware, the devices that we all use in class, whether they're smartphones or a computer or a data camera or a projector. I also include software, in other words, content for that particular hardware. And finally, connectivity, the ability for devices to access the internet and speak to one another. With these elements of implementing technology in mind, these three elements, the next step in deciding whether or not a certain technology augments instead of reinvents is to consider what the goals of education are and what it takes to teach and learn effectively. In other words, the goals and the reality that those goals are set in. As teachers, this will seem obvious, but I often get the impression that the implementation of technology is not necessarily taking this reality into account. First, let us consider two particular goals, by no means not all of them, of education, but these ones I do think that can be used in the utilization of technology. And then let us consider the reality surrounding these goals. Goal number one, the transference and retention of knowledge, in other words, explaining ideas, concepts and ideas, or the main job that we have as teachers. And the reality of this, we have limited teaching time. We have a large number of students of varying ability and application in our class, not to mention the fact that we're often burdened with administrative and managerial duties that need to be carried out during the lesson themselves. If I think about my own teaching, if I'm not starting my lesson with an absentee check, I have to first check the homework and then go through homework and then provide feedback for the homework. Only then can I get around to teaching a new concept, which includes having to go through worked examples, writing notes, handing out materials. I then need to make sure that I set homework, or if there's an assessment the next day or in the upcoming weeks, that I set revision. And on top of all this, I got to make sure that I keep up to date my punishment registers and that I make all the announcements that I should make in class that I was told about this morning and that I've invariably forgotten about by the time the lesson comes about. There always seems to be so much to do apart from teaching itself. After hours, I typically then need to mark assignments and tests, create new assessments, prepare for new lessons, or source and create new material. And as for my students, I'm sure that they would argue that they do more than us, but during class they need to take notes and store the handouts they receive, and after hours they need to do homework, revise, and study. They certainly do think that their lives can be very hard, and they often can be. Goal 2. The ability of students to pass an assessment, or in particular, and arguably most importantly, the exam that awaits them at the end of matric. The reality, well, for the foreseeable future, the vast majority of our assessments, especially the National Senior Certificate examinations, will require a student to put pen to paper, actually write down the question on a piece of paper in a sequential order, presenting it step by step in a way that's going to be marked. Not necessarily only multiple choice questions, and certainly not necessarily multiple choice questions in maths exams. There are a range of technological resources that aim to contribute to these particular goals. But however innovative and clever they may be, for them to be successful, they have to work within the realms of reality. Now, keeping in mind the two goals that I've mentioned, keeping in mind their realities that they're based in, and keeping in mind the three elements of successfully rolling out technology in our teaching, which would be willing teachers, support staff, and a successful and properly maintained infrastructure, I think that we are ready to start asking ourselves, is there technology out there that augments rather than reinvents? And the answer for that, I think, is yes and no, depending on which particular goal of teaching or which particular reality you're trying to augment. In terms of the administrative duties not directly related to teaching, you have school management systems that help to administer attendance registers, discipline systems, student records, the capturing of marks, compiling reports, communicating to parents, and a lot more. However, there does seem to be mixed reports when it comes to the efficacy of some of these systems, and it depends on who you ask whether these school management systems augment or reinvent. My recommendation for this, it's one of the rare instances where I think it will be advisable to get into the game later rather than sooner. I think it is very valuable to go to a school with similar needs such as your own and to find out from them if they have used a school management system and whether it has been well justified or not. I suggest not necessarily going into it immediately, as you will then not be the guinea pigs for a product that is still being tried and tested. So I think that we should go to schools that have school management systems and find out from them, how has this gone? Has this been a major change for you, or has this actually augmented the process? For those administrative duties that teachers have in the process of actual teaching, so something that can really make a difference in the classroom, there are learner management systems which allow you to share important communications with your class, make handouts and revision material easily available, set homework and revision for your students, enable your students to submit assignments, enable them to work collaboratively if they need to, and much more. One can think of these as a digital classroom in a way, where a teacher and their student can interact virtually with each other. My recommendation for this, I personally believe that this is one of the areas in technology that has been developed sufficiently to the point where it provides significant augmentation rather than reinventing the process. Such products include Schoology, and then you get Edmodo. And Edmodo, for me, I would describe it basically as the Facebook version of learner management systems. But ultimately, I would have to recommend Google Classroom, which is, they're all well established, and they can be great time savers when they're used effectively, and when obviously you have the infrastructure to be able to use them, and so do your students. I personally believe that Google will probably one day own the world, so I think that they would be a good bet. Buy in right now, join the revolution. Okay. In terms of one of the main goals of our teaching being the transference and retention of knowledge, I believe that there are hardware devices available that can augment education significantly. Many of us are familiar with, or at least know about, interactive whiteboards and data cameras or data projectors like that. And that document camera that I have right there, for example, that I will be using a bit later. While that's still relatively new, I think that those things can all be fantastic. All of these pieces of hardware make it possible for us to record our lessons and notes for storage purposes, and to make them easily available for distribution on a learner management system, for example. And this is where tablets can come into play. All that is hot right now, so hot in education right now, tablets. They can be used very nicely in this way. A tablet can fulfill all of these functions and then still be portable enough to take home and to be used for preparation the next day. A tablet in the hands of your students can mean that they can potentially carry their textbooks around on one tablet, although we've yet to see a lot of the publishers come to the foreground in this regard. And it can also mean that they can portably transport all of their notes. Now, my recommendations in terms of hardware. There's a few. First, the physical specifications and capabilities of a device. What that device includes and what it has available for you to be able to do physically. That can be the big difference between augmenting or asking people to reinvent something. It must be remembered that the vast majority of work that we as teachers do and that our students do, the vast majority, either needs to be typed or it needs to be literally written onto a piece of paper. And tablets can be fantastic in the way that a student can access their notes, access things that you send to them on a learner management system. However, my personal recommendation would be that we wait to a point where tablets that can be connected to a physical keyboard, either an actual connection to it or a Bluetooth connection to a physical keyboard, as well as tablets that have a stylus inbuilt, affordable tablets like that. I'd personally wait until those are affordable so that your students not only can carry their notes around, but they can literally simulate the entire work process. For English, I can type my essay. For maths, I can do my maths homework, send it in straight like that. So, those physical specifications I think are massively important. And once again, it might be a case of waiting for a little bit longer for those special kinds of tablets to become available and actually affordable. My second recommendation in terms of hardware is the following. The order in which you invest in your technological infrastructure is of vital importance. The order, and those three aspects of technological infrastructure, they are hardware, they are software, they are connectivity. There is little point in getting your school equipped with devices if your internet, in other words your connectivity, is not up to scratch. There's little point in expecting 180 learners in grade 8 to be able to use the internet if you are on a 4 meg line, for example. We'll hopefully see Wi-Fi that works perfectly brilliantly here when I try to use it, but obviously connectivity can be a big problem wherever you go. There is also little point in getting the latest devices available or even large amounts of connectivity available if the software, if the content for your devices is not of the quality yet where it's going to be able to actually enhance your teaching practice. I would say that connectivity is the backbone of a technological infrastructure, and it is worth investing in before you plan to roll out smart devices or prescribe to any particular software. I think one would do very well for future innovations to, at this point, blanket your school in excellent internet connectivity. There's a lot of options in terms of internet connectivity, but we are ultimately, hopefully, heading towards a future of optic fiber internet, which we can all hopefully expect. I know that provincial education departments of Gauteng and Western Cape are doing their best to roll out broadband to schools. I very much hope that that would be within the timeline that they say it's going to be within the next year or two, but we'll see how that goes. My third recommendation for hardware is that you don't have to be prescriptive as a school in terms of the brand of devices that you use. You don't have to be an Apple school. You don't have to be a Samsung school. You don't have to be a HT8 school or whatever that brand is. In the future, well, or if you have good enough connectivity right now, all of your different branded devices will be able to speak to each other, and any content worth its weight in salt will be able to be downloaded on multiple platforms, available on the App Store as well as the Google Play Store, for example. Okay. In terms of student assessment, so moving on from hardware devices now onto the aspect of teaching student assessment, both administering assessments and preparing your students for assessments, there are once again many offerings, but we must always ask, is this augmenting or is this reinventing the process? For providing practice and revision, you have very clever innovations such as Intelligent Practice by Siavula and MoMaths, which has recently been acquired by Microsoft, I believe. These online-based initiatives offer your students the opportunity to revise and to study by practicing questions of varying difficulty. In fact, the questions align themselves to the difficulty of the students in front of them. This is an example from Intelligent Practice for the Everything Science, I believe. Among their many impressive features is the ability to automate the process of marking and provide instant feedback to a student if they get a question wrong. However, I do think it is fair to acknowledge that this automated marking and feedback can only consider the final answer that a student puts in, either from a multiple choice aspect or by entering a single value over there, such as that. These programs cannot assess a student's step-by-step answer in the format required and the format that is used for marking in a test or final. Furthermore, the feedback offered by these programs for an incorrect answer cannot necessarily identify where the student has gone wrong and then go in detail into that particular session. Okay. So my recommendation for revision and practice, to be perfectly advertising here, would be to go with paper video. The aim of paper video resources is to provide all students in South Africa with easy access to quality tuition for the specific problem that they are having in their subject. We have started on this mission by enhancing the widely used resources of past exam papers in the subjects of maths, physics, life sciences, and accounting through the grades 10 to 12. And we do so by embedding video solutions directly into past papers. Our questions, and each one is aligned to a QR code on the right over here. And furthermore, it has these little codes over there, these 4-digit alphanumeric codes. And if I were to turn to a particular favorite question of mine and read that, I will then be very overjoyed to show you my solution of that. So we have a little question here, question 13, probability, which myself and a friend made up, but maybe this would like to start not throwing a hissy fit. Okay. Julius, Jacob, Helen, Mampele, Mangosuthu, Tera, and Desmond sit down in a row of 7 chairs to watch a movie together. How nice. Helen and Mampela are both girls and the rest are boys. And so if a child was struggling with how many ways can they sit next to each other if there are no restrictions on who can sit where, if a child was struggling with that, they would go, oh dear, perhaps I need to either scan this with my smart device or I need to go onto the internet to papervideo.co.za, and then they would be able to do so. Now let's see how this internet is going to go. So I would take my smart device and I'm going to scan this guy over here. And it is scanned, and we'll be waiting now for this to load up. Okay. In all of our past papers, you will see that the video solution is not simply a dry retelling of the solution itself. What a student would be expected to write would be written in black ultimately, and any other theory they would need to know or concepts they would need to know behind the question would be written in a different color. There's our 7 seats, for example. They wouldn't necessarily need to write that, and that coloring in is just me trying to explain as I speak and talk over the question itself. And when I start writing in black ink, that will be an indication that that is what you would have to write if you wanted that full marks for that particular question. In this way, what we're aiming for is that any student with an internet connection can gain immediate access to a teacher explaining that specific topic and the problem that they are struggling with at that time. A student can watch the video as many times as they wish or skip back to a specific part of the explanation to ensure that they have understood all of the required steps. We are very careful not to assume any steps, and we want to make sure that with our experience of teaching students of varying ability in the classroom setting, we anticipate as far as possible the common errors they are likely to make. We like to think that it's like having your own personal tutor available to explain a specific problem that you are having whenever and wherever you need it. And any student or teacher can go to our website and download the question papers. There is a free component as well. Any student, any teacher can go and download 4 past papers of our 10 offering and watch those videos and access entirely for free. But if they want access to 10 past papers, all with video solutions, then either the ebook or the physical hard copy book would need to be purchased. These resources are rolling off the presses at the beginning of the second term, where we are intending on then doing a mass rollout by contacting and visiting as many schools as possible. Each book contains hundreds of questions and video solutions that amount to many dozens of hours of teaching time. Our matric book, for example, will have over 600 videos in it, which amount to more than 60 hours of teaching time. We're also very proud of the fact that our video solutions are very data light, having achieved an average rate of 2 to 3 megabytes per minute of viewing time. However, we recognize the fact that access to the internet and data is not necessarily something that we can take for granted in our country. And as such, we have been exploring a number of ways to make the resource fully accessible to those students who do not necessarily have access to an internet connection or a fast enough internet connection. And what we have found in our preliminary research is that a large number of households across all socioeconomic brackets have a DVD player. So what we've decided to do is to provide our video solutions on a DVD as well. But the important distinction is that the DVD isn't necessarily available for purchase or mass consumption. It is a situation where a school is identified as one which has students in it that don't necessarily have access to internet, and then we are going to try and sponsor that school with the DVD as a resource. While paper video can be used in the classroom to augment the revision process before tests and exams, it was designed to be a resource that students could use on their own after hours. By using our resource to revise at home before an assessment, our video explanations will hopefully mean that teachers are saved the hassle of having to re-explain concepts and solutions unnecessarily in class. Instead of going through those problems that your students should be able to handle on their own, you will be able to hopefully focus on revising and teaching those sections that your students are struggling with most. Alternatively, choosing to use paper video in the classroom could essentially be like doing revision on steroids. Presuming that your students have access to a device to use in the classroom, each one of them can individually be working on the particular section that they are struggling with, enabling you to walk around and to give focus and attention to those students who require responsive and more personal input from yourself. Okay, finally, while we do require that a student or school purchase the ebook or hard copy book to gain access to all of the video solutions, 4 of the papers are downloadable entirely for free with all of their video solutions available entirely for free, but the full 10 are available for purchase. We want to desperately avoid a situation where students and schools are excluded from our resource as a result of not necessarily being able to afford it. As previously mentioned, a portion are free, but we want to make sure that schools and students, all schools and students, have an opportunity to get the full resource available to them. And that is why we are really proud to have entered a partnership with the Actuarial Society of South Africa, ASA, and we have joined forces with them to make use of something that they've set up called the Actuarial Education Trust, the AET. And through the AET, we are channeling corporate social investment towards the sponsorship of our resources for those schools and for those students who would otherwise not necessarily be able to afford them. We are distinguishing between very broad two camps here, those schools which have students who have parents that would be able to afford this extra resource, and those where we cannot expect that and cannot take that for granted. For those schools who we cannot take for granted that the students will be able to afford the resource, we are hoping to build a database of those schools. We are hoping to get in contact with those schools, to get them into partnership with us so that we can then on their behalf go to corporates, go to private companies, and then get resources sponsored for them by using corporate social investment that will go through that trust, which is a public benefit organization.
Very much for coming to speak to us about technology. I think you spoke about CSI, and so many companies speak about technology, incorporating technology, offering technological sort of focused CSI from their companies. And I think it's important that as principals and as educators, we know what is out there, but we know what is needed in order to augment our teaching in our schools instead of trying to reinvent it. I'm sure that there are many people who are here today who have some questions.